Good evening. Starting to get really tied to this phone here. I think I've recorded 8 different whatever it was over the last 2 days or 3 days. So we'll be posting this as well. But happy Feast of St. Joseph. I may have mentioned this whole, sort of insight at a daily mass, but not on this feast day. So I just kind of want to walk through briefly what St. Joseph actually did. So I think a lot of the times, he's sort of this unknown character. It's really sort of interesting when you think about it that the only 3 bodies that we don't have in the Catholic Church. So you go over to St. Peter's Basilica, you're going to find, numerous apostles that are buried there. If they're not there, we have other churches with all of them. In the Catholic Church, we have all of the great saints throughout all of history and magnificent basilicas and cathedrals, but we don't have Jesus, obviously, rose from the dead, ascended into heaven. We don't have Mary, obviously, risen from the dead, body and soul in heaven. And we don't have Joseph, which is really sort of odd. So we have a big T and small t traditions. This is just a small t tradition that Joseph actually is also resurrected from the dead, body and soul in heaven. But nobody really talks much about him, even though he's the universal protector of the church. So underneath Mary, it's sort of interesting when James and John talk about sitting at the Lord's right and his left. Obviously, the Blessed Virgin Mary is at his right. But it's speculated that Joseph is actually at his left, so they call him the terror of demons, right? He's an extremely, second only to our Blessed Mother, powerful saint in heaven. And yet from the time he comes on the scene in the scriptures all the way to right now, he's just sort of not mysteriously unknown. And yet when you think about the reality of what he did in his life and who he was, it's just absolutely magnificent. The level of docility and trust that he had to God, which is why they call him a just man. And we just sort of, read all over it. But if you break it down and sort of set it in a real life context, which I think is one of the things that the devil has sort of done to us, right? And I've said this before, but you have these saints, and in some way, because it was so long ago, this whole thing is just sort of turned into a fairy tale for most people. Right? When you were telling this to first generation people, they lived in that time, even 500 years later, it was still very similar to that time. It wasn't that far away, but 2 millennia later in a world that does not have any characteristics of what that world had any longer, it just sort of reads as a fairy tale. Very similar to the Garden of Eden. But it was real. And so you have this man who is living in Galilee. He's a carpenter. You can imagine just a regular guy, small town business. As far as we can tell, nothing super successful. If you go to Capernaum, you can tell Peter actually had a very successful fishing business because his house is right next to the synagogue and only the wealthiest people lived there, even though it was a smaller area. If you think of Nazareth, it was only 120 people. I mean, that's a pretty small town. So if you think of all of the dynamics that come, even now, with a town of 120 people. Namely, everybody knew everybody else's business, right? I mean, it's like a large, large family. And so if there's some scandal and or, accomplishment, that is known. So that's the context that we're in at this time. Secondly, like any other couple, you have 2 people that are totally in love. And they're young, right? There's a lot of theories around this. I really subscribe to the fact that Joseph was a typical younger man. Not in his teens or anything, but younger. And so he finds the love of his life. He is in love with Mary. He doesn't know that Mary is going to be the Queen of Heaven, is immaculately conceived, perpetual virgin, the mother of God. He doesn't know any of that. As a matter of fact, I'm quite sure he was a just man, so he goes to synagogue. He was probably a devout Jew. But it's not like he was a scribe or a rabbi. He didn't have some unbelievable education, putting together the pieces of how the Messiah was going to come. Furthermore, he's nowhere near where the Messiah is supposed to be born. He's in northern Israel. That's down by Jerusalem and Bethlehem. This isn't even on his mind. He's going to his job, trying to make ends meet, found the love of his life, betrothed to her, so they're in the process, engaged, getting married. All of it seems to be going well in a town of 120 people. And it's in that context that this young bride of his, we speculate 15, 16, seems odd now, would have been normal for the time, shows up, sits him down. Now just put yourself in this situation. I need to talk to you, Joseph. Okay? I'm pregnant. Now the man knows that he has not had any relations with her. So, if we just stop there, for any couple, in that moment, what's being revealed is that there has been infidelity. And not only infidelity, but infidelity that has radically changed their relationship. This is an infidelity that can be covered up and or forgiven, because this infidelity has produced another life. So just sit there for a moment. It's a great moment of contemplation. What Joseph had to go through in that moment, the pain, the suffering, the betrayal. What's he going to do? And if that's not enough, following that, probably instantaneously, is, but I had an apparition of an angel last night, privately in my room. Nobody else saw it, or whenever it was. It was actually the Archangel Gabriel. I don't think Our Lady would have known where that was in the scriptures either. Somewhere in Torah. And this angel told me that I am going to be the mother of the Messiah. And at this point, right, we're not into the Son of God stuff. We don't have all the theology that we have now, that this child is going to be miraculously conceived by God. And I'm hoping you'll take me into your home. So in that moment of betrayal and pain and hurt, and seems your life is totally crashing down, this fable and tale is told to you that seems so unbelievably to any normal thinking person outside the box and ridiculous that at least you could tell me the truth. Who was it? Right? And yet, we know for certain, at least in that moment, this man's loving and merciful heart, clearly the reason why God chose him, decides to ensure that she is not stoned to death. Now, we're not dealing in a Christian environment, right? This is prior to Jesus and all of human rights and everything else. The common way at this point would be to stone her to death for adultery. And most men would take probably great pleasure in it because of the betrayal and the hurt and all this. All show this, fill in the blank. But the first thing that enters, clearly he loved her. He loved her so much that he still wanted to protect her besides what had been revealed, not knowing yet about the rest of the details. As a matter of fact, he'll really never know about the rest of the details. And so that tells us something about Joseph, and it tells us something about what God sees a beautiful human as, especially a man. Masculine and yet loving, and most especially a heart of pure mercy. Stage 3. In all of this distress, actually, anybody seen Jesus of Nazareth here? This is I grew up with this, the 4-part series, right? And after this happens, total side note, Joseph goes and consults the rabbi, which I'm quite sure he did. And the rabbi in the movie goes to, the front of his tent, and he looks out, the sun's going down, and he said, "Women, the most beautiful of all God's creation. But thank you, O Lord, for making me a man." I think that was all the guys that just laughed at that. But who knows what kind of dialogue took place there? He's under tremendous stress. He goes to sleep that night. And God doesn't appear to him, right? Now that would be the easy way out. The Lord, I have so many questions for him in this type of stuff, but he's going to take the hard way. He doesn't have a vision, he has a dream. Now, if you bring this into the modern day and age, right? Maybe it happened then too, and you're telling your therapist about the dream that you had, modern psychology and counseling is going to say, "Well, sir, you are under so much stress right now, it's your mind trying to make sense of all of this. Thank God you're still sleeping and actually dreaming, because it's good mental health." So he has a dream. And this man who has this heart of love and mercy has such unbelievable faith and trust, most especially in God, that he receives this dream as coming directly from God himself, rather than just the stress and duress that he's under. Wakes up the next morning, and in that faith and trust in God, and you can imagine the Blessed Mother's relief as he meets with her again and says, "This is what happened. Clearly this is from the Lord. I believe you, and I'm taking you into my house." Great. That's not the end of the story. Now we're in a town of 120 people. And this is really important for all of us to hear, because clearly there is a timeline with pregnancy. And 2 different realities are going to be in the face of the town. One, Mary was unfaithful, and therefore this child is not Joseph's, but apparently he's loser enough to marry her anyway. Maybe not. 2, more likely, this unbelievably immoral, indecent, unfaithful to Torah couple could not wait in the eyes of the Lord until they moved in together. And so he got her pregnant before all of that happened. Can you imagine the gossip, the stories, how his business must have suffered, the ridicule behind the scenes, the eyes of a town of 120 people looking at them wherever they went? And then if that was not enough, they only had one child. And unlike our modern day and age, that would have been considered borderline cursed. Why? Because of their immorality and their sin of not waiting. And so now Jesus also suffers all of that gossip and all of that reality through his entire youth. Gentlemen, I'm going to tack one more thing on. This holy man, and I am absolutely convinced, and I say this with the utmost reverence, that Our Lady was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful woman. That for the rest of his marriage, he was as celibate as I am. Navigating through all the trials and tribulations that they faced, trusting God the whole way. So when we call St. Joseph a just man, and yet he got credit for nothing in his life, zero. What we mean is that his heart was so filled with love that he just poured all of his masculine heart into the Holy Family, into God's will, trusting the Lord, expecting nothing his entire life, of which he died before he saw Jesus do anything of what was promised. And to date, apparently the world is still not worthy of knowing any of it, because we have this little blip in the gospel that we read today, and that's it. Our Lady has all of the feasts and the queenship and the story and the rosary and all of it. We don't even have Joseph's body. And so as hard as it may be, it's always been a testament to me as a man that what God expects, and you see it in Jesus' life too, even though he's God, is that we in love for whatever our family is, are called to a nonstop self-gift and outpouring in love, mercy, trust, and faith until the final breath of our life for the salvation of those entrusted to our care, expecting nothing and hoping in eternal life. Saint Joseph, pray for us.